It's good to see you all. So I'm really, really honored to have Imani here today, and I'm going to hand it over to our colleague Ja to introduce Imani. So give it up for Ja.
I'll also make the presentation. Hopefully by it.
I want to pour a little water for our ancestors, our collective ancestors, all right? So, this is to clear the way so that what we are about to do is going to be distinct, informative, and hopefully enjoyable. So, only two, and that is for all of those who came before us and who opened the way so that we can be here today doing what we're doing. I'll share.
So Imani is here representing the Yoruba Cultural Center. The Yoruba Cultural Center of New York was founded in 1990 by Yoruba Priestess, educator, community organizer, memory keeper, old school butch lesbian, Imani Rashid.
Oh, we've got everything in there.
The center aimed to gather Afro-diasporic people, primarily from the New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut area, to share history, language, divination songs, and dances of the Orishas, which I think you'll touch on more today, and the cosmology of the Yoruba people of Southwest Nigeria. On Saturday evenings, the Yoruba Cultural Center hosted lectures from a litany of academics, organizers, spiritual practitioners, and more. And the Yoruba Cultural Center closed in 1993, but its community building and impacts have been very lasting. At this present juncture, Imani and the community she has built through the legacy of the center and her ongoing Yoruba practices recognize a need for the space to reopen and reground people and Afro-diasporic histories and collective cultural practices. So the center is organizing its archive and its library and reopening its doors.
Thank you.
And we'll share, at the end of the presentation, we'll share flyers for this Saturday.
Yeah, we have a big grand opening of the center this Saturday.
All right.
Well, I brought this picture of Mommy. Thank you, Goodman. I brought this picture. Mommy is a graduate of City College twice. She got her master's and her undergrad. And you know how our parents struggled sometimes to help us, so she would have to drop out. Most of my life she was in college. And when I finally graduated from NYU in 1962, Mommy graduated in 63 and became a teacher, and I was a teacher. And you know, IS 201. Have any of you ever heard of IS 201? That's what she taught. She taught young people to be business folks. So entrepreneurs in Harlem, way back in 1993. But anyway, so I'm here. I'm going on 85 on March 9th, and I'm going to have a big bembe for March 9th at the Yoruba Cultural Center. Bembe is dance and song and whatnot. Okay, so I made a little timeline for myself. This is a photo that was taken 35 years ago at the Oyotunji village where I was initiated. You know, I'm used to, as a teacher, having a stick. Is there a stick? I guess you don't use that anymore. So I'll just point with my finger. So, Sheldon, South Carolina. Have any of you ever heard of that village in South Carolina? Okay, I went there and became a priest of Shango. So that is, Shango is known in our belief system because, you know, all of the, whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, all of it's the belief systems. And so sometimes I carry this hatchet with me to remind me that Shango is a warrior. And there I am again 35 years ago we did not know that there was a photographer in the village who was taking photos because really you're not supposed to take photos of initiates, newly initiates. But my godfather said it's okay. Oh, thank you. My godfather said it was okay because Django had me already doing the work. So, yeah, so that's how that was. And when we are initiated, we spend 7 days on the throne, kind of like, well, how many of you belong to sororities and fraternities? Do any of you? Well, you know about sororities and fraternities, and well, they got that from pretty much the African system. We say it's Greek. I hear people saying Greek. I'm an AKA myself, but I hear people saying the Greek orgs, but actually it came from Africa. Okay, so that's me playing drums, and that's one of the things that Shango is known for as well, drum playing. And that's how we communicate and whatnot. Okay, and so I want to start talking, I think we've talked about, I want you to know who I am also in relation to architecture and real estate and that kind of thing. So my ancestors, who we just poured libations for, and yours. My father's family comes from the Caribbean, Barbados and Grenada, and my mother's family comes from Georgia. So that's I consider that a really good balance. Now, a couple of years ago, I went to Grenada to a family reunion, and that was really good to because they have some historians there. I don't know if you have this in your families, but the mother-daughter team was so good she could actually go back to my grandfather, and who came to the United States in 1919. The United States, because of the racism that was involved then, people coming from the Caribbean could not come into the United States. So that's why we have such a large population in living in Canada. So they went up to Toronto until he could come down with his wife, my grandmother, and they bought 2 properties right there on Edgecombe Avenue and 138th Street. So those houses stood in the family, were in the family, and it was about, it was different then. I was born in 1940, but it was different when I was born, and I noticed that people in the neighborhood who were the proprietors, the owners, their the way they related to, we called them roomers then, but they were tenants. The way they related to was like extended family. So even though you didn't know one another, it was at big holidays, they came down and sat at the table in the dining room, and it was a lot of that going on. It wasn't the owners versus the haves versus the have-nots or anything like that. So those are some of my first memories of community and how that happened. And Pops Bullen never wore anything but a 3-piece suit and a gold watch. I can remember. He had been in the Navy, in the British Navy, and was responsible for bringing people down from Barbados to Grenada. So that's important because to me, and that's of course my heritage. So, but what I'm saying is to go back, because that's one of the things we do in our belief system and whatnot. We make sure that we have setups for the ancestors. We always acknowledge them. Before I left, I spoke with them about what I was going to do, and we continue that. And I don't know how many. Raise your hands. How many of you have a practice that you acknowledge your ancestors? Any of you? Okay. Yes. Excellent. Excellent. Because the more we do that, the more they help us. Especially when you're 85. Sometimes I need the support of the living and the not living. I need all of that, and I sometimes hear them, and I think if you listen carefully, you'll hear they're always speaking to us, but we don't always listen. Okay, so we went. So this is how architecture. I'm so interested in the architecture. Yes. So there is 819 Riverside Drive. I can tell you, I was hanging out we talked about non-binary, lesbian, old school lesbian. So when I was coming up, Mom used to say to me, they say you're a good teacher. And I knew I was. I was president of the Black Teachers Association in the city of New York for about 3 years. But one of the things Mommy said, why you have to dress like a man at night? Because my friends see you. So I went to live down in the village, Greenwich Village, and $50 a month apartment. Had a good time. I learned a lot, because I had been kind of cloistered, I guess you might say. But when Mommy called and said, it's time to come uptown now, You're 30, I was 35 years old. It was 1975. She said, we're going to buy some houses. Wow. You see, Mommy didn't even come from that family. Mommy was from Georgia, remember? And the West Indians, on the West Indian side had owned the property. But you learn a lot when you're around. That's why we have to teach the children. No wonder people lose their brownstones, folks, because the children aren't prepared to how to keep them. It's very important. Once you own something, it's important to be able to keep it. So here was 819. I didn't want to live in the house where Mommy was on 139th Street, which is known as Drivers Row now, which is where the Yoruba Cultural Center is. But I said, Mommy, I got to party. I got to have a good time. I played drums. So I didn't want to disturb anybody. So I found myself a house. Guess how much it cost in 1975? 10,000 US. 10,000 US. So that became $100,000 renovation later. And that was the Yoruba Cultural Center. Marian Anderson used to live there. There were some people that used to live there. That Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier used to be frequent visitors before I bought the house. Now here's the Yoruba Culture Center. Okay, so those are some of the people that were instrumental in the Cultural Center. And yeah, so that's good. Oh, there's Cynthia Turner, a priestess of Oshun. I don't know if you know too much about the Orishas, which are the deities. And as Dr. Clark used to teach us, Dr. Clark here, he said that in that walk, right, that at the time, now I'm not sure what the research is now, but at the time in 1990, it was thought that the life began in Egypt. I see here some people nowadays saying that that's not so, that is maybe it wasn't so, but that those people began to migrate over hundreds of thousands of years, and the deities' names changed. So there were Horus, right, and Isis, and then later on you hear about Shango and Oshun, and all the various others. I think there's 250 of them or more. So again, coming to this country, when Africans were brought over here in chains, right? You all know about that, right? The more they're trying to keep it quiet, I'm not sure what you know, what you don't know. But raise your hands if you know about the Middle Passage. And okay, good, all right. So, of course, we know some of those people never made it here because what did they do? It was thought and more important to just jump in the ocean, which is why we call it Middle Passage, because there's so many relics, there's so much, so many treasures and whatnot in the bottom of the sea, right? And so, when I was in Grenada a couple of years ago, I told you, I found out that we were part of that group that jumped off Leaper's Ledge. So it was the highest area in Grenada, okay, called Sotiers. And that's when the indigenous people turned around and they looked and they saw the Africans being enslaved, and they decided to get in a huddle and make the decision to jump. And so it was hundreds of them that jumped to their death. And rather than have their youth and their, the generations, of course, brought up there. But of course, I wouldn't be here, and some of us wouldn't be here had we all jumped, right? So luckily we're here. So this Women of the Calabash, that was a group that I was close with, and they're no longer existing now. Madeline Nelson, she was, anybody know Madeline Nelson? Ever heard of Yayo Dele? Anyway, she was the founder of that Women of the Calabash, and they played the calabashes. Okay, which is very close to Shango as well. Okay, so this was a birthday. Oh, okay, it was my birthday. One of the many. And yeah, so that's younger Imani. And so, classroom situation.
Yeah, the rest are really just photos from the history.
Yes,
the-
yes,
yeah.
yes. We can just
So
go
we can
through
just keep
that.
moving
Yes,
through.
yes. So there I am smoking a cigar. And just sitting on the shrine. And, okay. Those are some of the offerings that we put on the shrine. Okay, so I'm looking at, I can see it better here. Actually, I know they can see that better. And so we usually put fruits and to the Orishas. And you see Shango is wrapped up in red with the beads hanging. And people give offerings. This is when we do what we call a bembe. And actually having one for my birthday coming up on the 9th, and you all are invited if you want, if you've never been to a bembe. We'll give you the address. We don't give the address out too readily. We don't have it on flyers because I'm reminded that DEI exists, right? So we're not trying to do that. But we certainly will, you let us know and you can come, of course. And the drums and everything will be going, the drums and the chanting, and it is just wonderful. Okay, so I think, we can turn from there. And so that's the mask, and of course, yes, raffia. And I guess one of the most comfortable places for me is to sit on my own shrine. So yeah, so that's it takes a lot of hours to do that decoration. It's artwork and it's also spiritual work and whatnot. Okay, and that's me and my niece and a drummer and oh yeah, some of the elders. Wonderful. You know, I think it's so important to have intergenerational groupings. You know, where we just, you know, and so that's why I'm so happy that you invited me here and whatnot, because I can say I still got it going on. Okay. Okay, that's another friend, and you see the background, the two drummers, and me. And oh, there's Mama KK. Okay, so Mama KK was my age then. Back in 1990, she was my age, and she taught me a lot. One of the things is you can look at her there and know, you cannot look at her there and know that she was one of the like the belly dancers, and she raised money with her. She made money, okay, in those days, right? And the Cotton Club dances. That's what she did too. And she would raise money for my godfather, who was the king of Oyotunji, to have his temple on 116th Street. So it all comes back kind of full circle. 116th Street, back in when I was in college, like in the 50s, was a time when people who belonged to the African traditional belief system would meet their partners to be at that place. And yeah, so there we are with some of the practitioners. Another birthday? Oh, no,
This
that's
is
the
the
center.
1 year anniversary of the
Okay,
center.
that's one. Okay. Good. Thank you, Joe. I haven't seen some of these pictures in a long time. Having dinner.
It's a repeat.
A lot of these people are.
It's more recent.
Yes. And there is our flyer
Mm-hmm.
for the event that's coming up on Saturday. And I guess more about whatever else I wanted to say that's not based on the pictures is because I'm just reminded that I was always into traveling. So every summer when I had 2 months off, I would always travel. So that's when I started going back at age 22. I'm traveling the world, going to, spending the summer in Africa. First, I went to Europe. A friend of mine, one of my best friends, said, when we get out of college, we're going to teach 1 year, and then we're going to travel. So we did that. And if your parents are teachers, usually you either hate teaching or you love teaching. I loved it, and she hated it, but she forced herself to teach 1 year just so we could travel. And of course, we met these Ghanaian people, being to meet people in. That's when I got interested in meeting Africans because there were so many of them living there, and one thing led to another. I ended up going to flight school, and when I was 40, and I flew single engine planes, and I think that was all just part of the preparation that brings me to who I am today, and wanting to do for you what I know must be done. You must be educated in terms of having the various teachers. Like this young man is 28 years old. He's a Babalawo. He was initiated in Nigeria, and he'll be teaching us about. And see, we're starting out where people are, because most people really do have some connection to the Black church, and not to look down on it or to be ashamed of it, because as he will talk about on Saturday, it was that his grandmother's spiritualism that also taught him to listen to the spirits and to follow what they had to say. And of course, it took him to another place. It took him to a higher place, a more advanced place. He started to go to Africa and whatnot. He's only 28 years, and so I say he has a brilliant future. So everything I do in life, for the rest of my life, is for you. So I want you to ask me questions if you have any, and I'll do my best to answer.
People, everything that happened in it. And so I'm curious, like, from your perspective, from your work stewarding the Yoruba Cultural Center, owning a range of property in Harlem, what sort of practices are important for architects and folks thinking about historic preservation to really keep at the forefront when we engage, with buildings that come with history, that come with religion, culture? It's not just this building was here, or this is how people are engaging with this. There's a whole other contour and set of questions that we have to attune ourselves to and how we, do this work. So I'm curious from you, what do you want architects in training to know in terms of how they engage with this work?
Want to know, like, what actually happened. Like, it's almost like architects in training almost have to be into a spiritual mode to think about what were these people doing. When I think about my own house where the Yoruba Cultural Center is, people were riding horseback, and that's why we have converted those spaces to garages now, but they used to be places for horses, So if we can, I know it's hard to imagine that in New York City now, to think about horses, but also you will find, he was saying something about like that the other day, that he had a grandfather who had horses in Brooklyn. So yeah, when you think about these houses, the way they're built, because the new constructs are different. I don't know, quite frankly, and I did tour a lot of those apartment buildings, the brand new ones that are going up, some in the water over there at off the FDR Drive, and some all over the city. I was like, these places look a little too small and too cooped up. And I can tell you that I said to the broker once, now, oh my goodness, I can't even believe, this was only a couple of years ago, because I wasn't certain if I was going to sell this brownstone. I didn't know that I was going to do the Yoruba. I didn't know that Shango wanted me to do the Yoruba Cultural Center again. I wasn't, and so I was having people take me around. And we're walking now with 45 stories. And I said, okay. I was interested because there was a pool. That's my main reason, because I also swim. So I swam for NYU when I was, 18 and whatnot. By the way, the only brown face in the water. So whenever I went to compete, that's what was happening. But I said, maybe I'll live long enough one day. I can get the gold medals because I didn't. I was just on the team then. But so we were in the building, and I'm feeling funny. I said, "Where are the molesters?" She said, "What did you say?" I see 2 elevators and all these apartments and 40. I said, "The molesters, where are they?" Because I know they can't. They're not all registering now. She said, "Oh, we have cameras, you know." That didn't make me feel any better. I was not gonna go moving into a building like that. Because I'm like, how did they justify this? And then I found out that there were a lot of people, they're being built for people that are not of this country. Russians, Chinese, they were already in there. So, so anyway, back to your question. One of the ways that they used to use those houses on Starvers Road, they come with a whole history. The girls would be presented to society, and they would walk down the staircase. And so, very dramatic staircase, and they walk down, 16 years old, the Sweet 16 parties that you would later hear about. But this was that. And the suitors would be waiting in the ballroom, like in the floor that you'll be, the room that you'll be in if you come over to the Yoruba Cultural Center, where we're first going to be doing our lectures. And they would be presented to society. Okay, so that was one of the customs that was carried on there. But I think there's not been enough attention to the history of these buildings. I think it was something very curious. I think that they couldn't even give a house on Lily Sapling away back 35 years ago. Okay, $1, and people didn't want it because our psychics weren't, we weren't prepared to be able to accept something. And now we're starting to hear that wealth building and that owning land is very important. But it's one of the mistakes that the elders made, I guess, working hard working, not teaching your children what it meant, what that was. So when they died and they left the houses to the children left and went to live in Queens or went to live somewhere else. And it wasn't considered important. So I hope that's beginning to answer a little bit, but I think we have to delve into what are the usages of these houses. One of the things, let me just add one thing before I forget, because I'm at that stage where I might forget if I don't say it. I noticed recently I started putting things out. Like, you have pots and you haven't used, or dishes or glasses, and I put them out right in front on the table. People were walking by and taking them. That's what they were supposed to do. I remember one brother said to me once, he said, "I get all my things from here." I said, I felt so happy, because I'm not throwing them away. I'm also not cluttering my place with it. And it just made me feel good that people were taking. That means that they're respecting and valuing, something. We can recycle it, in other words, so that other people can use what you have. But in terms of architecture, I think that's a lot. What I would like to hear what some of you have to say about architecture and these buildings that you are. That's part of your study. What would some of you think about? How about just buildings in Harlem? You're here in Harlem, and as much as they say, they don't like to say that City College is in Harlem, it is.
Can I actually ask you a question about, I think, building off the same question you're asking of, why is it so important to have the Yoruba Cultural Center at specifically 244 West 139th Street? What does it do to reopen it there?
Oh, well, first of all, so this is a gentrified area now. So there are lots of people that live here that really don't know anything about our culture. Well, I can say one thing, they don't shop in our neighborhood. They don't go to the post office in our neighborhood. I know a lot of people don't go to the post office, but they don't go to the bank. They do everything downtown, so they're just really living here. And the renovations are wonderful inside some of those homes I've been to. You know, they have a swimming pool, they have all the security, and they need, I guess. So what was the question?
I was asking why the location for Yoruba Cultural Center. What does
Oh.
it do to open the Yoruba Cultural
Oh, I
Center
couldn't do it
specifically?
anywhere else. It would have
Yeah.
to be. It would have to be in Harlem. I live there currently, but when it gets big enough, and I don't have to live there, you know what I mean? I can relocate somewhere because I imagine it getting, getting big, and we don't know right now what's going on politically and whatnot in this country. But what I do know is the more that they want to keep the history away from us, the more we're going to press and keep it going. And I imagine in all of your cultures that you feel the same way. I imagine that you want to have the history of Pakistan, India, China, the history of all of your countries on everybody's tongue. Why? Because we can do it now, because the world is in a way smaller because of the technology. We can just, I remember at the beginning of COVID, I simply did some podcasts, like they weren't called podcasts then, but they that meant we could connect with people on various in Grand Caymans and various places, and we could talk. And one of the things I did was get binary, non-binary, gay, lesbian, trans people together and hear what they were on their minds, even though they were half a world away from us. So that kind of stuff is very important. We can communicate better now.
I think it would, kind of building on this, I think it'd be really great to hear more about the story of this building, and that you started to talk about when you first purchased it.
Okay.
But what is that evolution into the images that we saw on the screen? When did you decide, what's that evolution into the Yoruba Cultural Center? And what was that like for you?
Well, it's in progress now. So like I said, I may not be there. I'm currently there, and we're working on the archives and getting the pictures and all those kinds of things together. Probably looking for, from you, maybe more volunteers. And I really want to collaborate with you in a big way, because I'm thinking, even though this is not the school that I graduated from, Lillian Weber, have you ever heard that name? She was a European woman who was very influential in my training, because as a teacher, she would supply me with 4 or 5 student teachers every term in my classroom, because I ran an open education class where the kids went from station to station as opposed to sitting down, like this at a desk. And so, so I was saying I want to collaborate with you, because I have a good team aboard, the friends and whatnot, but I know that we're going to do better when we collaborate, and it makes more sense to do it with you than to go down to NYU, which is a big distance from me. I'm not driving anymore, all of that. But so I would love to see, are you kidding? City College, get a grant, renovate that place, have all kinds of media places that we could just push the button and different information to come out. Bring in all the professors from around the world, okay? And do the darn thing,
You mentioned
And the historic,
Mm-hmm.
the photos, was that in the building you have now? Are those from
No,
that same
those were
place?
from the other building,
Okay,
the $10,000 building.
got it. And so, is your dream to kind of resurrect some of that practice, or is it a different kind of idea now?
No, it's pretty much the same,
Yeah.
pretty much the same. I mean, at those times I had a program came on, it was cable TV. It came on every Sunday because somebody would videotape the lecture and take it to cable TV. You all know about that? Take it down to cable TV. And on Sunday, my students in the middle school and over there on 96th Street in West End, that was West Side High, their parents and them would watch it at 11 o'clock every morning. In fact, it says it on one of these newsletters, said that we came on and they didn't know if I was in the country or not. And one year I took a sabbatical and I was supposed, how many of you know about Audre Lorde? You ever heard of Audre Lorde? Okay. So Audrey said, you want to take a sabbatical, Imani? So this would have been my second sabbatical. She said, do it, but you don't have to go anywhere. She said, go to the back of Africa Woman. And I turned to the back page and there was names and addresses. And I called my theses, it was like a thesis, to get the sabbatical. That means a year with pay. You know what I'm saying? And I called it the Black Holocaust. So a lot of people at the Board of Education, they were mad at me. They didn't want to give me that because, supposedly was no Black Holocaust, so I got it. I finally did get it, and I was there, all dressed up in my African clothes, doing my my thing. But so I say to all of you that whatever your dream is, the thing is when it's supported by a spiritual, it's called your path. It's called your nia in Kwanza. It's called your destiny. Yes, you're at the stage now where you begin to get in touch with what is your destiny? Why are you here? I know you're in college to pursue a certain major, but what is it that you're chosen to do? Because this in reincarnation, it may have been something you didn't finish last incarnation. I don't know. I feel very driven to do this work. But I can't do it without you and you and you and you. So come out and support us and lend us your information. What is it that you think we should be teaching? Because I don't want to be out of tune with it. I want to be right on point as to what is needed. I think that I'll start with what I left off there, because a lot of it has to do with we don't just decide what our sexuality is. It's not something that you decide. I think that people used to decide to keep it hush hush and not mention it. But I'll put it this way: I went to an Indian workshop. Mutananda used to have something up on the west upstate, and my mother used to like to go with me. This one here, she used to go with me because she liked the culinary, and they always had good food and whatnot. But one of the things, this was about in the 70s, and he was doing a reading for me, and he said, how come you've never been married and never had any children? And I said, because I'm a lesbian. He said, oh. Because someone else was sitting next to him told him what that was. He said, oh. He went underneath and pulled out some long scroll. He said, we know about these things. And I said, what do you know? He said, where you were born at that time of the year and the time of the day and whatnot, where you were born, that is determine your sexuality. That's how. He said, it's a good thing you never married a man. I said, why? He said, how you say that? You would? And his friend told him, oh, you would have bust his balls. So that was a pretty good, that's my answer to you in terms of, I went and told Mommy, I was so happy to tell Mommy, it's not something that I made up and I decided to do. This is what I was destined to do. So a lot of what we do is, we're destined to do. We think sometimes it's our choice, but it depends on how you see it, how you feel it. Anybody here have any feelings about those kinds of things that I know somebody has a gay brother or sister or something in their family. Do you think they just doing that to get on your nerves? Or, okay. So, yeah, that was a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking, sort of lingering on the Yoruba, sort of in the name of the project, and obviously undergirding the work over the last few decades. We tend to think of Yoruba maybe as as a place or as a language, primarily in Africa. But of course, as you mentioned and touched on even in your own upbringing, it shows up in a lot of other cosmologies here in the Americas, namely Brazil and Cuba.
Yes.
And so I'm curious, I think similarly, like if we were to use that in some ways as a metaphor for Harlem, actually as a lattice work of relationships across cultures, across street blocks, across typologies and various kind of social groups. I'm curious like how the Cultural Center sees itself as participating in that larger lattice work that we know of as Harlem. Like, can you maybe just describe, you alluded to a collaboration that you might have with the college, but I'm curious, like, what is the nature of the collaborations with other sort of partners and friends of yours in the neighborhood or in the community? Like, maybe just kind of offer a bit of context for the sort of texture of the community that the Cultural Center finds itself in.
Okay, that's a good question. Well, for 47 years now, I've been doing Kwanza. And Kwanza in the neighborhood. Recently, I started doing it at the Sage Community Center right near us. The other years I had done it downtown, but now, of course, not being able to move around so much. And when I said, well, it makes sense too to also why have it at Judson Church? It was just a matter of evolving. But yeah, Yoruba, of course, there's about 70 or 80 tribes in Nigeria alone. And what happened, I don't know if any of you know, it was like a lot of Christianity, when Christianity came and pushed in there and converted people. I'll say it this way. When I was in Hawaii, I noticed once, I was in Maui, and there was a big museum there, and I became friends with the two owners. One was a brother who took a lot of photographs, and the other one was the actual curator of the museum. And they said that they went to Bali, they risked their lives going in a small boat to villages that were still in the bush, they would say. And what happened there happened in a lot of places, which is they told the people that, oh, you shouldn't be walking around naked, you have to put on clothes. And the people were like, what? And they said, they told them that these life-size carvings that they had, that that was idol worship, and they had to get rid of them. So they would throw all their artwork in the bushes, and of course it wasn't these two men's fault. They would just get a barge or something and remove them. Of course, they put them in their museum, and it was $10,000 or $12,000 then. But my point is that the people put on clothes. I look closely at the pictures. You see these beads I have on? They had on their clothes, but they still had on their beads. And so, just to show you that the missionaries didn't know that they were coming from a long tradition of the same beads that we have, that I wear around my neck, that the practitioners wear around their neck. Because the missionaries didn't know about this, they thought they had taken everything. But they promised to build them schools. And so they built them the schools, and, well, that was the worst thing, to have the enemy build schools. That's a whole other conversation. To have the enemy build your schools, which is one of the problems that we have right now. Okay, so that's a whole conversation. But in terms, just to say the Yoruba, and of course, I appreciate that that a lot of the history that some of the Yoruba went to Bahia, right? And some of them Cuba, and Cuba was able, some of them went to where some of my relatives are, Trinidad, but their traditions couldn't last there for whatever reasons. Well, one of the things is that Shango is the main one, the main deity that exists today in Trinidad. But of course, it's mixed with a lot of Christianity, right? But mainly because the British, see, that was the other thing. They didn't have a way to camouflage it. The British didn't have that, whereas the Spaniards and the Portuguese had their Catholicism. So even today, when you're walking down Bahia, down the road, or in the parade, how about that? They have something to the Blessed Virgin Mary every year, and they they parade with the Virgin Mary on their heads, right? Everybody knows, even the little ones, that is, the goddess of the ocean waters, and that and that even in Cuba, it's amazing. I've been there a few times, and I remember once I got up on, and I never did do well in a Spanish class. I had to take a Spanish in order to graduate, but I never did well because I was taught by a Jewish man with a Jewish accent, a Brooklyn accent, speaking in Spanish. It was terrible. But I ended up going to a neighborhood. I ended up going to a conversational class with a friend of mine, and we passed the class. But I just said that to say that when I was in Cuba, most of the Cubans are dark skinned. People think that they're probably light skinned Cubans in Havana and Matanza and so on. They're not. Most of the light skinned ones came here. The fair skinned ones, the ones that sometimes you might think they're white if they don't speak or something. But the thing about it is I got up on a soapbox and I said, I hope you get to Africa one day so that you can see where this tradition came from. Because you can imagine that they're being brought into the various islands, right? Into Cuba. So you can imagine, I say you, and how about you, young man? Okay, so we're all being brought in chains, right? And we may find some commonality so that we can, you might be a priest of Shango, you might be a priest of Shango. And in the night, we get together and we just find out what herbs can we substitute, because the same bush that was burning, that was growing in Africa may not be growing here, but we can use the divination. That's what we still have. You can't take away from the people what's in their heads. The belief system is what we carry around with us in our head. You can chain us up and we can be in chains and walk about, but we still have the belief system with us. So some of you think about those things that you've learned. But so we would get together and we could initiate more priests of Shango as long as we had the bush, the divination, and the other ideas, the other practices that we knew of, and that was how the tradition survived in different places. Now, how can we? That's a challenge to say. How do we take this village of Harlem, which is a village, and incorporate what we know we need? I'm up to the challenge. Thank you.